Okay, so let's get started today. Thank you, first of all, for all of you taking time out of your days. I'm sure you've been to many webinars over the last few weeks. It seems to be the new way of communicating, but hopefully you're getting plenty of value from it. So, welcome today to today's webinar. This is the second in a brand new series brought to you by VoyagesAfriq and AviaDev Africa, and our aim is to provide actionable insight for the African tourism industry, and really provide a hotbed of discussion, bring people in from different parts of the industry to discuss some innovative and collaborative ways to survive this crisis and obviously to thrive at the other side of it as well. Now, our first webinar, which you can find on the AviaDev Africa YouTube channel or on our podcast as well, took a helicopter view of the current situation in Africa and African tourism. But what we decided to do in subsequent webinars is focus on specific sectors. And we thought that the best place to start would be the MICE sector, which for those of you, obviously, I'm sure most of you do know, but that's the meetings, incentive, conventions and exhibitions sector, which is a huge part of Africa's business, but has massive potential as well. Now, before we start, as always, I want to state that, of course, the COVID-19 situation is ever progressing. The health of our populations, our loved ones, is absolutely utmost for all of us. So please do heed the advice of the World Health Organization and your respective governments. Stay home today so we can travel tomorrow, as my colleague Kojo would say. So before we start, I just want to share with you the housekeeping guidelines for those of you who haven't been on one of these webinars, if you're one in the minority that hasn't joined one of these before. Just to let you know, only our panelists are going to have the ability to use their microphones. If you would like to make an intervention, ask a question, make a comment, making comments, please use the chat button on your screen. If you want to leave a question, then there's a Q&A button as well. We'll be monitoring these as we go over the next hour or so, but anything that we don't, we'll obviously put to the panelists post-event, and you can reach out to them. I'll send you their LinkedIn profile link so you can connect with them post-webinar as well. And then, of course, after the webinar, we will put this recording up onto YouTube, onto the AviaDev Africa channel. So the only other thing to say from my side before we get started is just for those of you who don't know me, to introduce myself. So my name's John Howell. I'm the CEO and founder of AviaDev Africa. We're an event focused on developing air connectivity to, from, and within Africa. Our event was due to take place actually next month in beautiful Madagascar. In Antananarivo. We've postponed that to September, and obviously we're taking a watching brief as to what the future holds when it comes to the events industry as well. So I'm very interested and very much invested in this situation that we find ourselves at the moment. So what I wanted to do before we get in is I just wanted to hand over to my co-host. I said to you before that obviously we're doing this in collaboration with VoyagesAfriq, somebody that we've had a fantastic relationship with over the last couple of years, and somebody who's really keyed in to the African tourism industry. So Kojo, over to you.
Hi, John. Thank you very much. And thank you to our esteemed panel and all the participants. We'd like to say thank you for joining us. And as we started, this webinar is supposed to help us to be able to find solutions, not necessarily a panacea, but also to be able to see how we can chart the path in the new world after coronavirus. And just by way of introduction, my name is Kojo Bentum-Williams. I'm the editor and publisher of VoyagesAfriq travel magazine. And what we do is to cover the tourism, MICE, aviation part of the continent. And today, as John said, we'll be looking at MICE and how it's been impacted and how we can navigate, but also importantly, look at how things will be after coronavirus. So once again, thank you so much for making time, because I know there's a lot of webinars, and these things help us to be able to learn and progress together and see how the continent can take advantage of this situation. So I'll hand over back to John for him to do the introductions of our panel, then we can get started.
Absolutely, thank you, Kojo. Thanks a lot. So I will start actually with Rick. So Rick Taylor is founder and CEO of the Business Tourism Company. He's a very good friend of ours here at Bench Events as well. Rick, for those of you who don't know, has framed, built and developed 6 national convention bureaux across the continent. These are South Africa, where it all began, Rwanda, and it's great to see Frank here from the Convention Bureau, Uganda, Togo, Ethiopia, and Kenya as well. He's an expert in global tourism strategy and a destination brand architect, speaker, moderator, whatever you want him to be. Rick is your man, basically. So, Rick, I wanted to start with you in terms of trying to get to grips with what these convention bureaus should be doing right now, and how you see the current state of the market. You know, what can be done right in this situation before we start talking about solutions. What should people be doing right now?
John, hi, very good morning. Great to see you and Kojo and the panelists and everybody else in the room. It's yeah, as we all know, it's sort of very much unprecedented times. What should bureaus be doing right now? But if you put the lens on Africa, it depends where in the tourism life cycle the country and the bureau is. So we referenced South Africa. In fact, 20 years ago, John, Cape Town Convention Bureau was established 20 years ago. Since then, perhaps there's been a little bit of slowdown. Rwanda, Frank, you'll remember, 6 years ago, we launched the Rwanda Convention Bureau, almost to this very day. And I recollect us going with trepidation to the very first IMEX, where, again, we'll always salute the team at IMEX, where they most generously shared and gave us, I think it was no more than maybe 9 square meters. And that was really the outset. But since then, back to your opening comments, Uganda's come to the table. You've seen Ethiopia talking, Kenya certainly coming out of the starting blocks, Tanzania's on the horizon. So there's a lot of excitement starting to build around East Africa specifically. And I've always maintained that East Africa is categorically, from an African perspective, going to be the next center of gravity. West Africa will come onto the playing field potentially in a year or two's time. But back to your point, John, in terms of what should the bureaus be doing. So I think that, a reply from a South African point of view would be very different, perhaps, to a Rwandan perspective, very different to an Ethiopia, Kenya, or Uganda point of view. But what everyone should be doing is what I refer to as the Grove strategy. You might remember a gentleman who headed up Intel many years ago, Andrew Grove, Grove. And he had a management discipline that he encouraged his people, his senior people particularly, to fire themselves. So to sort of walk out that door and come back in with a new eye, get out of that comfort zone, because we all know the comfort zone is a wonderful place, but nothing grows there, right? So we need to get out of, I think if you look across the continent as such, we need to move away from our comfort zones. And for me, that is very much the business events arena. It's a very scientific, it's very strategic, it's very, very measurable. So one of the tasks going forwards via tourism boards is to make sure and put MICE higher on their agendas. You know, I often say, what use is a sundial in the shade? Well, we need to take this sundial, this sector, which is one of the most profitable, hardworking, deliverable sectors, and put it high on agendas. I mean, what sector that can bring 1,000 people, a convention, to a destination when those delegates were not coming in the first place? It's the marketing, it's the sales. So back again, reverting back to the question on the table, what should bureaus be doing? It depends very much where they are, I think, in their tourism area life cycle. Had they been around for 20 years, 6 years, or just coming out of the starting blocks, which each one of those strategies will be obviously very, very different in terms of maturity. Take cognizance of the Grove strategy. And another term we use a lot in our think tanks is and maybe a lot of us around the table can appreciate this, certainly those of us who've got children, is the Lego strategy. Strategies have been built around, let's say, Lego. We all know what Lego is. That shape and form of that strategy, that Lego piece, should be broken down Maybe there will be the same colors will be there, perhaps. How do we reposition? How do we realign those pieces? Because I don't think as we go forward, it's going to be vastly different. Maybe we can double click on a few conversations. I'm not sure particularly where this new normal is going to be. So I think that maybe I'll leave that there and we can potentially unpack that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is an opportunity to lobby governments to put tourism higher up on the agenda, because we're going to have we're in a reset phase here. So it's our responsibilities, obviously, to show the economic benefit and the sustainability of the industry, that, you know, it's not a natural resource that is going to be used. It's not finite. It gets replenished, and it actually builds, and it creates such a huge value chain. And we're seeing that from the impact of it not being able to take place, I suppose. So thanks for that, Rick. Before we move on to Yoadan, I'm just going to run a quick poll for all of you attendees out there. So if you can all pay attention, we'd like to ask you this question. Our panelists can vote as well. So if you can all vote, we'll leave this open for about 45 seconds. Please make your, please do your votes now. I see they're starting to come in. So when do you feel the MICE sector in Africa will return to 2019 levels? What we'd like to do is, towards the end of the webinar today, we're actually going to ask this question again and just see whether you are more or less optimistic. So I see we've got nearly 100 votes. Last 10 seconds to put your vote in, and then I'll close the poll and I'll share the results with you now, and then we can compare these later on. So we'll get to 100. We've got to 100. Fantastic. And here we go for the panelists as well to frame our conversations. We're looking at, most people are sort of somewhere in the middle. They're saying Q3, Q4 2021, so another sort of 15, 16 months away before we start to really see that coming back. But obviously a lot of people saying it will start to come back in the early part of 2021. So let's see how that changes over time. So what I would like to do now is I'd like to come to Yoadan, and actually Kojo's going to pose the question, but I'm going to do the little intro for you, Yoadan. So Yoadan Tilahun is the CEO and founder of Flawless Events, which is a proudly African-based international events management agency which specializes in end-to-end design and production of international conferences, corporate events, and is based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. So Kojo, the floor is yours.
Hi, Yoadan. Thank you. And thank you for joining us again. As a PCO and also a leading PCO in Ethiopia and in Africa, how are you dealing with it? And if you can give us the situation right now in Addis Ababa in terms of your other colleagues and how they're managing it, and then how from the government point of view, you are trying to have the balancing act between meeting the needs of your suppliers. I know you have some contracts with other supply chains. So from that viewpoint, can you give us what's happening in Ethiopia, and then you can go ahead and tell us how you're managing it?
Okay, actually, so let me thank you for having me to begin with. And I'll start by looking within Flawless, and then I'll just go further out just to give a better context. So what we did within the company was just looking at the human level and saying as things were developing, and I think for Ethiopia was more mid-March, when we're starting to see cancellations coming in and the government really trying to take some measures on COVID. Internally, we said, okay, we're going to start working from home in order to keep everybody safe. And also looking outwards, we started noticing that a lot of cancellations of events or postponements started coming in. And financially, just as a business, we are about 15 in the company. We looked at it and said, this trend is going to pretty much wipe out everything we had as incoming events for up until September or so forth. How do we sustain our company? What are some of the measures that we need to put in place as a company to make sure our staff is taken care of, and that we actually have a company to come back to when the industry comes back, because you don't want to completely deplete all of your savings, and then when the industry is back up, you're back at zero. So we did some numbers, we had some agreements internally with the staff, and we just moved into our homes and started looking at strategy of how do we come back as a company stronger in the new normal. But even when you do that, you kind of have to give people space to mentally breathe, let the grief of this process take place. And it's actually, it's mental and physical on how some of our teammates are adapting or coping with it. So, I think we really need to take the human element into consideration as well as the business element. As a country, Ethiopia is not on a complete lockdown. Some measures have been put in place to ensure that, social distancing, putting masks on, ensuring that restaurants and bars are closed in the evenings. But the government has taken conscious decision not to completely lock the country down in view of the large number of poverty that we have and an ability to actually get to everybody to ensure that they have their daily living. So movement is still allowed, but everybody's just asked to take responsibilities. As an industry, MICE is housed within the Ministry of Tourism. We do not have a convention bureau as of yet. Discussions with Rick's team has started, but it has not been fully implemented. So we're still, though small as an industry for the country, we're housed within the Ministry of Tourism. The discussions are more geared and focused towards the hotels and the larger industries, such as the travel and tour agencies and the hotels, and not as much for our sector. There's no serious bailout from the government perspective. Again, we are a poor country. So we're almost taking it one day at a time and just watching the trend in the global industry to see when Ethiopia will be joining in.
But how are you dealing with your supply chain? I mean, because I know that obviously you have a lot of supply chain that you have, you've been working with them. Do they understand it? And have you had conversations with your colleagues in the industry?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as events started getting canceled, because this is almost like a force majeure, all of the suppliers on their end also started letting go of the contracts. There's really nothing else that you can do. And we're looking at least for our suppliers, we try to take care of whatever we owe them. And we also try to collect on the other side. But our entire industry is at a complete standstill. And we just kind of have to hold each other's hand and understand as we go through the process. But yeah.
Thank you. John?
Fantastic. Thank you, Yoadan, and it's great to get the view on the ground. So we're going to stay in East Africa, and we're going to come over to Frank in Rwanda. So Frank Marangwa is the Director of Destination Marketing for the Rwanda Convention Bureau. He's held this post for quite a few years now and oversaw the opening of the magnificent convention center, which actually played host to the first two editions of AviaDev Africa and AHIP as well, our hotel investment event as well. So Frank, I want to come to you because I want to talk about confidence. I want to talk about how can we get confidence back into mass gatherings, into any type of business events. Ultimately, what we're being told at the moment and what we're being conditioned to do by all of our governments, by the World Health Organization, is stay away from people. So how do we run large gatherings and how do we encourage people to want to get together in this way? Will it be the same once we come out of this crisis?
Thank you, John, and thank you, my fellow panelists, and good morning, everyone, and good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. I think, John, to your point, it's a matter of time. We're going to bounce back. The sector is going to bounce back, and we're going to get to where we were in a few years back. But this is going to really take time. I think from the poll we just seen from the participants, perhaps in the third quarter and fourth quarter of 2021, or maybe even perhaps in 2022, definitely we see a good comeback given the solidarity and the fraternity we're seeing from our industry partners, our potential clients. I think we've all understood that this is a global challenge, and from a country perspective, based on the number of events that we had registered in this quarter and also coming quarters, most of the events have been cancelled and postponed to future dates. I think for me, that is the first confidence that the industry is giving, the potential clients are giving to us as the destinations. And if we continue to be transparent, we continue to share what is happening, I think, in most of the countries now in East Africa, or most of the countries in Africa, really there's a big lockdown all over. But I think this is being done to ensure that we're putting health at the core focus of our well-being, to ensure that we staying home today, we're staying safe, but we're preparing to go out to really big and ensure that we keep business as usual. So from a destination point of view, we're seeing a lot of confidence. We've seen a number of, we've worked with our clients. We've been able to find the future dates where possible. Others, we're really watching time to see how it goes so that we can be able to find appropriate timing for the best time to host these events. At this stage, we can't say that there's no single event that has been cancelled completely, but what we're seeing is really a shift of time, which is really a good confidence from our destination and also our potential partners.
Yeah, so the postponement rather than the cancellation, which is obviously encouraging, it's pushing it down the line and keeping that communication going, I think is probably key. Thanks for that, Frank. I really, we appreciate you joining us. We're going to come to you now, Funke. Kojo will pose the question, but I'll just quickly introduce you. So Funke is has 16 years as an event planner. She's the CEO of Zafire. You'll have to tell me how to say it. Zafire, maybe? Zafire, like Sapphire? Zafire
yes,
Events.
You're correct. Yes.
Fantastic. And Funke has been recognized within and outside Africa for many contributions to the Nigerian events industry, and was included also in the BBC 100 Most Inspirational Women in the World 2016. So fantastic. Congratulations on that. So Kojo, over to you.
Hi, Funke, and thanks for joining us again. Now, as a leading player in Nigeria, both for the business side and the social side, how have you had to navigate this with your clients, with all the supply chain, and what is the situation in Nigeria? If you can give us that in your introductory remark.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me. So, I mean, in Nigeria, as you all know, it was around March. We were not, there was really nothing happening. We hadn't gotten any cases. And then all of a sudden in March, the cases started coming in. And all of a sudden, they had to shut down. And we are on a lockdown. We're on a lockdown. We've been on a lockdown for the past 3.5 weeks. And in fact, what was very painful for us at a point was that there was a wedding we had the day before, a wedding of over about 1,000 people. We had to shut it down for the safety of everyone coming to the event because they had banned gatherings of over 20 to 50 people. So for us, even as a company in Zafire, before the government had even shut us down, we had shut ourselves down. So we had gone into self-isolation because we had been in contact with 1 or 2 people that are actually tested positive. So we had to go into self-isolation to quarantine ourselves and just make sure that we were not carrying this virus. And after that was done, we were able to come back to the table and start working on how, of course, we're going to move the industry forward. At the moment, it has hit a lot of people in the industry. Every part of the event industry in Nigeria at the moment is on a standstill. There's really nothing happening because most of our gatherings, most of our events are usually events that are over 50 people. So we can't even do anything. All the venues are shut. Everywhere is shut down. There's nobody working right now in the industry. So it's really, I would say it has really, really hit us. But what it's also doing for us is allowing us to also look inwards. So we're looking inwards, we're looking for ways to manage this after it's done, or even look at our processes generally in the events industry. We're also engaging the government on how small businesses, medium-sized businesses can be helped. So all our artisans, all the people that work with us at the back end, how can we help them? You also asked the question about the supply chain. So definitely every single person has been hit, from the vendors to the planners, to everybody that provides a service. We were supposed to have a lot of destination events outside Nigeria. All that has been canceled. Destination birthdays canceled. People can't fly in and people can't fly out. So it's really hit us here in Nigeria, but it's allowing us to actually look at how we can do events better.
Okay, let me follow up with this. Now, if you tell me that the whole industry is hit, which is true, and this is a economic and a social also and health problem. Now,
yes.
If you look at Nigeria, I mean, you don't have a convention bureau yet. How do you, or how are you able to communicate with some of your colleagues? And if you go to the government or if you go to the table, which numbers are you going to put forward, and what is going to be your proposal for government to come to your aid?
Okay, so we have associations. We have event associations that I'm a part of. We have the ALIER Association, and then we have the APWEM. APWEM is Association of Professional Event Planners all over Nigeria. And then, of course, I have my the conference that I organize called the Event Experience Africa. So we have those three organizations, and those organizations are coming together to work on the numbers, work on the statistics, work on what the loss of revenue is and what we need the government to do for us. Now, one of the areas where we're putting things together is actually in the area of health. It's in the area of health, because one of the things we know is that when we come back, everything is going to change. Events are going to be different. It's not going to be business as usual. So safety, health and safety is one of the things that we are even drawing up at the back end of these associations to say, you know what, before you even introduce the policy, these are the policies that we are putting together to help the industry here in Nigeria. So from, social distancing, a venue that normally would has the capacity of 1,000 people, we're going to make sure that, of course, it's about 600 people. We don't, the health and safety in terms of hygiene of all the vendors at the back end. How do we make sure that they're sanitized? Their hygiene is major. So we're working on all that to be able to give the government a voice that we have, that the government will now be able to swing the policy. Luckily for us, the associations that we have been recognized by the government, and most people that are in the industry are people that are influential and have the voice of the government. So we're putting that together, and we're going to share that later.
Thank you. John?
Fantastic. Thank you, Funke. Really appreciate it. I want to come to our final panelist, last but not least, a good friend of ours. Kwache Donko, who's CEO of Africa Tourism Partners. He's got lots of experience in terms of doing tourism development, destination marketing, branding, my strategy. What I wanted to talk to you about, Kwache, is really technology. Now, we're getting very used to this. And is this rise of technology, or, it's always been there, but how do we actually leverage the digital tools that we have at our disposal right now? And how can we use them right now to get people more, really build their appetite to actually want to meet each other more? And what's that going to look like, in the future? How are we going to kind of have this kind of hybrid relationship where we embrace technology, but we still have the human interaction?
Thank you, John. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are.
Okay.
Right. I think technology has been around for a while. We all know since the time of video conferencing. And we thought that it was going to take over the MICE sector. It hasn't taken yet. But with the COVID-19, it's going to help to accelerate the use of technology across the board. From the consumer, what I mean by consumer is the clients, from corporates to associations, exhibition organizers, everybody, to the PCOs and the destinations themselves. Now the question is, how do we get everyone to buy into it? I think we got a challenge that we've not really put a lot of training, skills development, capacity building in that area. So across the entire value chain, and the budgets that every destination develops, every organization develops, there got to be a budget for training in technology. Right. Now, that will require all companies to invest good money into the infrastructure, the technological infrastructure that is required to be able to survive what we've all been calling the new normal. So that is how the technology could be rolled out. The second point, which is very close to me, my heart, is there is a need for serious collaboration for us to be able to roll out technology, particularly across the SMMEs, because a lot of them don't have the budget, they don't have the resources, and even medium-sized entities don't have. So the collaboration I'm talking about got to be collaboration with technology companies. There have been initiatives on travel tech across the world. I don't think Africa here, we look into the travel tech adequately. So my personal view will be institutions, destinations need to start collaborating with a technology company, from your Googles of this world, your MTNs, your Vodacom, your Tigos, to be able to have a specific and a dedicated package for this particular industry. And talking about that, last week when I was speaking in a meeting involving a lot of Africa, what I'm saying is that the telcos have to come to the party. Everybody is talking about technology, but what underlines and underpins the use of technology is data. Do we have adequate budget to pay for the data, the prices that we are paying for data now? And this is why there is a need for us to collaborate with the technology companies. Now, you were asking how is it going to go or how is it going to be rolled out? I see three scenarios. And the three scenarios I see, the face-to-face meeting are still going to happen, but it will happen with caution. There is what I personally call COVID phobia. And what I mean by COVID phobia, we are still going to be scared of traveling to places because we are scared of the remnants or becoming affected by the remnants of COVID. So COVID phobia is going to be there. People are going to travel for the simple reason that face-to-face meeting has its own characteristics. It got some unique characteristics that can never be replaced by technology, personalization. So strong business relations are established through face-to-face meetings. So the process will be first, it will start with virtual, like what we are doing, and possibly go to what I'll call the second level will be hybrid, where a small group of people will do, which is happening now. If you look at the UN, WTO, you look at the United Nations, international organizations, they have the hybrid model as we speak, where they are communicating with their offices around the world from their head offices, few staff. And from the hybrid, hopefully, we will move straight back to where we are, which will take about 2 years or more, as people said. So these are the levels that we have to embrace ourselves, and we all have to try and rethink the way we do business. So, John, to answer your question, technology is not going to take over, but it becomes a necessity. It becomes a very critical function in the way we do business, that without it, we will not be able to do the business. However, we can all not be experts in technology. Some of us, particularly those of us over half a century old, is sometimes very difficult. And a lot of the time we force things on ourselves trying to save money and not to get the right people to do. If you are not a technology person, you are not an expert in that, please invest a bit of your budget. That is why I started by saying have a budget item or budget line purely dedicated to technology and make sure that you get the right people to do the job. If not, you are going to fail terribly. So that is my view on your question, and I hope it responds to what you're expecting.
No, excellent. Thank you, Kojo. Really do appreciate that. I think exactly what you're saying, at the moment we don't have the option. So technology and the way we're meeting at the moment is a bridge because it's the best that we have. But of course, this will come back because at the end of the day, we're human beings with a need for that interaction. So thank you so much for that. Now, Rick, I want to come to you because we've had a great question from Jacinta at the Kenya Convention Bureau here. And as a destination marketing expert, she's asking, what narrative do you advise that we should take as Africa during the period when the travel ban is not lifted? What kind of messaging would be caring and sensible? Obviously, Africa hasn't been, in terms of the number of cases and deaths, it's not comparable to other parts of the world, but the future could change. So what can we do right now before we start looking to the future in terms of messaging?
Thank you, John, and absolutely thank you, Jacinta, sitting there in Nairobi. Yeah, I think right now the messaging is that I think that the playing fields are pretty level at the moment. The entire world, without exception, are having these kinds of conversations, these board meetings, all over, all four corners of the world. So the message from an African point of view is, if you come back to our facts, we are very much, as I was saying a little earlier, at the commencement our business events journey. And I think from a Kenyan point of view, who are coming out of the starting blocks, although Kenya, as we may remember, had its very first meeting way back in the early 70s. It was a World Bank IMF meeting. So, you know, brands and products such as Kenya have been tinkering, if you will, in this particular arena for a while. But back again, you know, the message is, it's a message of responsibility. It's a message of we are complying to all the WHO regulations. We are tuning into UNWTO. We are comparable and complying to international best practice. That's, I think, about the best we can really do. But the point is, I think, just coming back, John, for a moment, to support and weigh in on what Kwachi was saying. I think there's no doubt that live events, real life, will never be replaced by a digital life. And there's actually some interesting content. We were doing some work. 1 hour of face-to-face time is worth 5 hours of video conferencing. So if you look at efficacy, you know, the face-to-face will never change. So absolutely, Kwachi. That 1 hour is 5 hours of video, 10 hours of phone calls, and 20 emails. So the efficaciousness, the impact of face-to-face is huge. It's huge. So, you know, we've got to stay online, hold our course. The big question, I think, around the messaging is going to be led very much by our policymakers, our governments, particularly our health departments. You know, when do we wheels up again? When do we push back and get going? And I think that's where the conversation has got to go. Just picking up also what we said from opening comments in terms of what are convention bureaus, what are PCOs doing right now. So a lot of the Lego strategy, looking at the associations market, absolutely, because that sector particularly brings those larger numbers, those people who might well not have been coming to your destination had it not been for the meeting. And another source we reference pretty regularly is UIA, the Union of International Associations. I think all of us around the room know and are particularly au fait with ICA, who do a great job. And but on the other side of the aisle, there is UIA, which I don't think many convention bureaus or PCOs or other players in the arena maybe sweat that asset sufficiently well. If you start looking at the numbers just quickly, there are 4,000 associations in UIA that out of a database of, I think it's 39,000, but 4,000 associations are on the continent. And we can break those down. I mean, coming back to Jacinta, of which there are 287 in Kenya. So this is the kind of work that convention bureaus will be exploring, being proactive. Another thought, just quickly, while I've got the floor, John, Kojo, you know, I do believe that business tourism, MICE, let's call it whatever we'd like to call it, is going to lead the recovery program. You must have all those stock exchanges across the continent with shares that are softening quicker than we can drink a cup of coffee. What are we doing about reigniting the corporate sector? All those people in the sales forces of your Unilevers, your MTNs, your breweries. The list is long. Those corporates are going to have to get their sales forces up and running to retain shareholders. So there's a lot of work, preemptive work, to be done in our own backyards, in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in Rwanda, etc., Uganda. There's a lot of work to be done there, knocking on those doors, of marketing directors, managing directors. The way forward will be very much started, ignited in our own backyard, and that'll talk to associations, that'll talk to corporates, your incentive market. And again, we need to look at the E, the proverbial E in the equation, around what is happening, or should be happening, can be happening going forward around the events and exhibitions. So there's a mountain of work to be done.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Now there's a question from Nelly Swartz. In fact, it ties into my point where we're looking at how insurance and contracts going forward in terms of how a business is going to look. Now she asks that risk management will become essential in the management of future events. Insurance is expensive, but we have seen how Wimbledon has benefited from their insurance policies. Going forward, how can we assist emerging PCOs and destinations to affordably mitigate and afford event risk? Yoadan, I'll come to you that as a PCO, okay, how are you dealing or handling this issue about in terms of contract that have been signed already, because these are legal issues, and how do you want, if you like, the convention bureaus or the big agencies to be able to help emerging African PCOs to be able to handle this situation in terms of risk management?
When it comes to insurance, at least within the Ethiopian context, for the longest time, insurance companies were not really touching events as a space where they wanted to insure. But I think over the past couple of years or so, there's been more appetite to really understand what the events industry is bringing and what the ask for insurance is. I'm not very familiar with that space to say a lot, but I know that when we're asked to buy insurance by our international counterparts, we're able to do so. But it's also just looking at our contracts, because I know a lot of times smaller PCOs, we get so hungry for the business that we overlook the details of the contract that we're signing. And what COVID is showing us is, while most of the time we're looking at natural disasters related to weather or wars, now we have to ensure that we have clauses in our contract that says any pandemic that breaks out, that is also part of our force majeure if we need to cancel our contracts or postpone. So, I mean, at least for us, what this taught us is to really look at our contracts and say, are we really ready? And are we really protected in the clauses that we're signing? Or are we really just desperate for the business that we sign whatever is sent our way? So, it's a more of a wake-up call to say, be more conscious of what you're signing. Again, I don't know enough about the insurance industry to make assumptions, but my question would be, what are some of the large African focused? And again, I think we have a tendency of looking at what the rest of the world is doing and trying to import it into Africa. But do we actually have large African insurances that can provide insurance coverage to PCOs or to the events industry? It goes back to Kweke's point of collaboration across borders. What are we doing? And what are we selling to each other? And is it copy pasted from what Europe is doing? Or is it really speaking to affordability? And is it realistic to what African PCOs and each one of us require? And can it actually be then further drilled down into each country's realities and need? And again, affordability. So again, this is a good opportunity for the industry to look at the space.
No, I think that it batters the point that we need to be able to let decision makers understand the importance of the business event or the mines, sector. I'd like to bring in Mr. Kwache, about the issue about insurance. If you'd like to touch before you go to your original question about how, because you are also a convener of African Tourism Leadership Forum, okay? You organize other events and conferences. How are we able to bring insurance companies on the continent to understand, the role that they play when it comes to events, and then, we can be able to sit on the table and have a consensus about how we can move together?
Thank you, Kojo. I think it's each of the stakeholders naturally will have a financier or a bank or an institution that you work with. And these are things that I think not only in events, but across the tourism industry, we take it for granted, because we normally feel that it's not necessary for us to engage legal practitioners in the way that we do things or our financiers. when we are buying a house or a car, we are always compelled to take insurance. Now, we have not been doing it traditionally. So what I think needs to happen from now is that every single business that we will be doing, it will be very important to work with the financiers, our banks, which naturally will have the insurance component, whether it's being pre-financing or working with the destination or the host destination to be able to take insurance. It's a given. A lot of events naturally, or destinations and convention centers naturally requires the event organizer to take insurance. But those that are not doing it, I think they are doing that at their own risk. So naturally, it's something that must happen. The fact is, a lot of the smaller operators are not aware of this. So as part of our capacity building and training people going forward, these are some of the things that we need to educate people on. Now, adding to that, I'm coming back to the question that Jacinta asked, and Rick responded adequately, but I would like to add to what Rick said. What I believe the convention bureaus should be doing, in addition to what Rick has said, is threefold. Now, we need to make sure that we support the messages that our governments are undertaking to ensure that we contain the pandemic. That is immediate. So whatever contribute, I know as destinations, all destinations are doing that, a lot of videos, a lot of messages going out. But it's important that each and every destination, all the stakeholders harmonize whatever communication that is going out and able to share those messages across the stakeholders within that particular sector or subsector. So as a convention bureau, you have a lot of PCOs, you have a lot of smaller operators, you've got a lot of suppliers and service providers. They should be supported and encouraged to be able to support the containment. Another important thing that I think they should also be doing is working with them to make sure they are able to take care of their staff at this particular moment. Because the same staff that we are firing, they are the same people that we are going to need when things come back to normal. So there should be proper agreement. And I believe that between organizations and staff, that should be led by the convention bureaus to make sure that there is at least a baseline that will guide the industry stakeholders to be able to work with their staff. The second part is that we have to be basically sharpening our axis so that when the floodgates get opened, we are able to compete with each and everyone. The truth is that in Africa, we got the issue of quality assurance. And now it's even going to be worse when things come back to normal or the new normal starts. Now, already we have issues of standard, quality of accommodation, services, and all those kind of things. So one thing that I think we should be doing is that if even we cannot train people now, we should be looking at what are the guidelines, the policy, putting the framework in place to be able to ensure that we train our people to get to the level that we can compete well comparatively with the rest of the world. So even if we cannot train, I think we can be looking at the strategies, the ways of training our people to make sure that we are able to do that. The second one that is going to come, risk is going to be a big issue. Safety and cleanliness and health and all those things are going to be a norm. Now, as convention bureaus, I believe that we should be looking at what kind of programs, what kind of partners do we need to be able and start engaging them now. If we work with education institutions, ministries of health, and all the right people, we'll be able to currently possibly construct some framework or guidelines that we can be sharing with all our stakeholders to be able to apply across the board, from the PCO to the host to the client. And that to me is extremely critical. I also talk about the third one, digitalization. We are talking about the fact that the industry is going to be taken over partly by technology. What are we doing about it now? Jacinta, I've seen that you've already, with Zuru events, you are going to run some kind of a workshop or something, which is a very good way of moving forward. But I think this is the same time that we have to start working with the technology guys. Who are the guys who are using particularly the technology that we are using Kojo and John are using? What other platforms are there? The event management platforms that already exist. Are some of them prepared to come on board and work with us to make sure that we currently start training people online to be able to get used to that technology, so that if our staff are even at home, we can still give them access. So those are some of the things. Then adding to what Rick said again, I think we've neglected domestic tourism from my perspective for a long time, or depending on how one defines it, whether business event or whatever. And I don't think a lot of research work has been done to mine the data that exists across this industry. We always rely on the data from ACA. Rick has given us another one. There are a lot of associations that are there. Within our own backyards, do we know what exists? I don't think we do. I haven't seen any report that exists around that. And I've seen Dr. Kobe online, Professor Swati also online. I think this is something that we should look at. How do we get the conferences and the events and association within our own domestic area to work with us to make sure we keep them and not to take them outside? It saddens me when I hear a big corporate from our own destination. Where are they taking their incentive group to? They are taking them to Brazil. They are taking them to somewhere in Australia because they've done very well. There is so much in Africa, but it's because there is no communication between our convention bureau, ourselves, and them. I think we got to dig that up. There is AFCIA that exists. We should be talking to them now. How do we look at the associations that exist in Africa to circulate within Africa? So those are the strategies that we're looking at, because in the shorter to medium term, that is what we need. We currently have ACTA, Africa Free Trade Continental Area. It's just been set up. They are looking for opportunities to work around. Why can't we start the conversation now? And that is what I think that the convention bureaus should be doing. The good news is, just to share with all of you, during our last masterclass, about 5 countries, or 6, I think 7, agreed to come up with what we call the Coalition of Africa Convention Bureau. And I believe that this conversation should carry on so that we are able to engage the rest of Africa right in our backyard, so that we are able to basically get business within the domestic environment and the intra-Africa environment. Thank you, Kojo.
Thanks, Kwache. I just want to pick up on that, and I want to come to Frank, because there's a couple of things, obviously, that you said, but also that Rick said as well, that I think are particularly interesting. One is that we've talked about this a lot in other webinars that I've been involved in, and our first one as well is that there's a commonly held belief, of course, that domestic tourism will recover, then regional, then international. That's you know, they will all recover, but at different rates. So the first question, because we've had a couple of things here on the chat and on the Q&A, is, does this, if we're going to have a renewed focus on the domestic MICE market, does this give a new opportunity to small and medium-sized businesses to collaborate, to come together, first of all, because people are going to be price sensitive? But on the price side of things as well, we had a question again from Professor Kobe Mensah in Ghana as well, saying about pricing. Are we going to see the cost of putting on conferences in Africa go up, go down, or stay the same? You know, what do we expect? Are people going to try and make up for lost time? Because on a global scale, that's going to be difficult to compete if we're deemed expensive, and it is quite expensive to run, you know, generally to run international events as somebody who organizes it. But what's your thoughts on that, Frank?
Thank you, John. And I just want to actually start with the last comment Kwache made of focusing on Africa. It's very evident that right now, really our business is going to focus on intra-business. Reason being that we're going to have more confidence in traveling to our destinations or getting businesses from our neighbors than really getting long-haul businesses. So for me, I think this is where we need to put more focus. That's why I think discussions have started to, you know, form an established coalition of African convention bureaus, so that we can be able to share, we can be able to learn from each other, and we can be able to collaborate better, because we know Africa has potential. I think really this pandemic has given us an opportunity to look back and see what have we done wrong and what can we correct. And we feel that Africa presents huge opportunities. Again, referring to what Rick made comments earlier, the number of opportunities in Africa from associations to cooperate to intergovernmental, but have we really tapped into these opportunities? I think for me, this is the right moment for us to be able to go back and go to our drawing board and say, let's focus on Africa. I can bet if this is finished and which we believe is going to get finished, the immediate focus should really be within Africa. In relation to the question of pricing, I think we need to be flexibility. We need to know that flexibility is important and we need to be flexible. If we're able to assess the demand and look at the supply of what we have, then absolutely, whether it's a PC or whether it's a venue, whether it's a destination, we need to all work together, collaborate, and ensure that we get even the small businesses that are going to start coming in. Right now, we all know and feel the impact of the this pandemic. Everything is put a stall. The economic impact of the different economies and the value chain, everything has stopped. So I think as soon as this is really finished, let's start small, but the future is bright. I believe there's hope, and that's the message I give.
Frank, I have a follow-up question for you. Okay, so from the government point of view, i.e. the Rwanda Convention Bureau, we know that you've prioritized mines and tourism, as part of your government's plan to push development. But what do you say to people who say that in Africa, largely, the central government do not understand the value of either the mines or the tourism space? So then it's difficult for them to bring you on the table and make you part of the policies going forward.
I think, Kojo, it really comes from the national goals and the priorities of the different countries. A number of countries have really identified the tourism as one of the pillar for the economic development, and it's very evident. If you look at the impact the tourism sector makes to the entire community and the entire economy is so high. And for us, we've chosen to use tourism as a driver to our economic development, and it's been really paying. If you look at the amount of dollars that have been coming into the economy and the job creation and the investment it creates, and also branding the country, it's really massive. And we've made that choice deliberately because we know really the sector is going to contribute to the growth of the country. And similarly, this is any country in Africa that is at the stage of development, I would really argue that you look at tourism as one of your engine for growth. And beyond that, we're looking at the job creation that comes with that. We're looking at the dollar that is left in the economy. So I think with what we're trying to do at the African level, starting with the number of convention bureaus to come together and we voice our needs together, bring together the different partners. We believe that we can start with this and be able to bring on board other countries that have not really prioritized tourism and specifically the MICE and the meetings industry as one of their drivers. So I believe that the more we continue to work together and collaborate, more countries will open up and we'll see opportunities of really giving attention and importance to the sector.
Thank you, Frank. John, take it over.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. I think we've got Funke back. So I'd like to come to you, Funke, if hopefully your network's picked up. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Fantastic. You got us? Funke?
I think you have to unmute her. She's.
Yeah, no, her bandwidth is. She seems to the picture coming in and out. Let's have a look.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Fantastic.
Sorry about
We've got you now. No, fantastic. So the question I wanted to ask you, Funke, is about pricing. And I asked Frank, so you may have missed this, but do you think that post post-COVID, the prices for your services, for other services in your supply chain, are going to increase, or they're going to have to decrease to deal with the supply, the actual demand for putting on these conferences? What's your feeling on that?
Okay, so I think that for me, a lot of people, the purchasing power of many people in our country, right, or anywhere, is going to be limited. People are not going to want to spend money on luxury. They want to spend money on essentials, things that are very important. So even in any conference, in any event, people are going to be looking at events, parts of the event that are really, really necessary. So I think that prices, as much as possible for us in the industry, For me, as a service provider, I can't afford to increase my prices just yet. What I need to do is to gain the confidence of all my new clients, to let them understand that in this post-COVID era, we are here for you. So in order to do that, you can't afford to increase your prices. That is my view. And I think that's the view that everybody needs to adapt, because you need to actually make sure that people come back to the industry. I feel that people are going to be scared. People are going to be scared of organizing events. People are going to be scared of organizing conferences. So you need to bring them back. And the best way to bring them back is do not increase prices. We all need to be very empathic. Your clients, your customers, have lost money. Some have lost revenue. Some have lost their jobs. But they also, of course, celebrations have to also happen. So I'm not sure that we should increase prices. People will want to increase, but I'm not sure that we should.
Kojo.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, okay.
Did you hear me?
Rick,
okay.
Yeah, we heard you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Rick, I'd like to, ask you this question from Jackie Reynolds from South Africa, because so she's saying that how can we make, a business event exhibition part of our recovery phase, in terms of using existing platforms and new platform to spread the growth?
Sorry, I lost a little bit of the in translation there, Kojo, around exhibitions.
Yes, no, I mean, a question from Jackie Reynolds. She's saying that how do we use business events exhibition, as a way or part of the recovery?
Great. Okay. Thank you. Yes. Thanks, Jackie. Obviously, that E of the MICE acronym is very, very important. And again, I think from a convention bureau perspective, perhaps that isn't as high up on agendas as they ought to be. Although, we have particularly written a couple of event strategies for a couple of clients. And there are international, there's UFI, there are certainly some international bodies that one can plug into. I think, in my point of view, it's very much part of the longer tail. There is an appetite, no doubt, for that. And as I'm thinking aloud now, I remember, Yoadan, don't you recollect some, 2 or 3 years ago, there was the MICE East Africa event that happened in Addis Ababa, that a lot of us actually went up to try and help get that exhibition kick-started into East Africa. And for maybe the timing wasn't quite right, but I think certainly as a concept, an exhibition around MICE East Africa does have, it is germane, is relevant to the conversation we're certainly having. Also, what I do like about exhibitions, events and exhibitions specifically, is it allows, there's a sort of green field. We can kind of go in there and be a lot more innovative and exciting, if you will, and there's lots of product. And I think this is where certainly South Africa and the rest of Africa can work hand in hand. If you look at the event and exhibitions product in South Africa, which is pretty excellent. I'm just thinking of Reed Exhibitions and their menu. How can those walk for a start into the rest of the continent? And again, what comes to mind is a conversation around babies. Baby indabas. There must be loads of opportunity there, depending on the country in which it goes into. And is there disposable income and all those economic things. But absolutely, exhibitions, events, thank you, Jackie. It does need a spotlight. And I think the continent, there is an appetite. And maybe we can reignite somehow MICE East Africa and take that platform and walk it. Was in this case, as the name implies, East Africa, certainly start to walk it around East Africa, but there maybe is a MICE West Africa opportunity and a North Africa. So I think there's brand longevity in that exhibition.
Definitely. Thank you, Rick. So we're going to come to everybody for their final remarks. I'm very aware of the time, but before we do, I'd like to run the poll again. So if we remember, most people, I'll share the results from the previous one. So you can see most people were saying that recovery to 2019, probably back end of next year. So if we relaunch that, see whether you have changed your mind. It's absolutely wonderful to see that basically everybody is still on the line as well. We've still got 150 people engaged, which is fantastic, and absolutely the idea of why we're doing these webinars and more of a deep dive. We want to give people who are actively involved in these industries and these parts of the industry as much opportunity as possible to play your part. We have logged all the questions and answers. We've logged all the chat, so that will all be shared. The session will go onto YouTube. The audio will go out on podcast as well. So I'm going to end the poll now, and I'm going to share the results with everybody. It's quite similar, actually. At least we don't have any real negativity in the room with later than 2022. We've only got one person voting for that. But most people thinking next year will be the year of return to steal something from the Ghana Tourism Authority there and the Ghanaian government. So we'd like to get everybody's closing remarks. I'd like to start with you, Yoadan, because I know you've been wanting to say something. So over to you.
So I just wanted to say a couple of things. When we talk about, looking domestically or regionally and collaborating between different governments, and, yes, we have lack of data. We don't know how many events are actually rotating within the African community. I know ICA had done a couple of, had tried to get our numbers together. So then they've also tried to get the industry to trade amongst ourselves, and it's a slow process, but it's better than anything else that I've seen. But realistically as well, when you have about 5-6 convention bureaus in the entire continent, what we're talking about, we're going to get all these convention bureaus together and get them to trade or talk to each other. Out of 54 countries, you have 6 convention bureaus. So are we really being realistic when we say we're going to collaborate? My question is, and this goes to my panelists, how realistic is that? Yes, South Africa is super strong, and they even have convention bureaus within the country. And then you have majority of the country or the continent that's not part of this bandwagon. And we have conversations of East Africa, but where's the Central Africa, Central Africa? Where is West Africa? So we're such fragmented industry within the continent. For me, it sounds great for a webinar to say, yes, we're going to collaborate. When it comes down to the granular level, I find it to be a little bit unrealistic of how it's going to be implemented. This can definitely be another webinar. We're definitely out of time. But also looking at number of African connoted, African themed events that happen outside of Africa. We talk about Africa in London. We talk about Africa in Paris. Why don't our heads of state, our ministers say, no, sorry, my voice is done. If you want to talk about Africa, come to Africa. Has COVID woken us up enough to say, to, stand our ground and say, as leaders, not as PCOs or, convention bureaus, the world leaders actually look at the industry and say, you know what, it's time for me to rebuild my own industry. So if you're going to talk about my continent or my country, come to my country. At least come to the continent and have this conversation. So we really need to be a little bit more not politically correct as we try to rebuild our industry, and really look at ourselves and check ourselves and be really realistic of how ready are we to really collaborate where we don't even know each other, don't have a common platform to talk to each other.
No, I think you are spot on, and like we said already earlier, is a willing of all the parties involved to be able to participate in that. And that's why I come to you, Kwache, because during African Tourism Leadership Forum, we've had the event, you have people talking, like what Yoadan was saying. This is true, because even if you think about the fact that with 54 countries with 6 or 7 convention bureaus, and we have real challenges, laborious processes, trying to have an event in Gabon, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Ghana or something from the same African country. So we have to be realistic and say that, okay, are we going to start with advocacy? There have to be a pressure group. They have to meet our ministers who are meeting every time. What is it that we can be able to bring to the table as a convener of ATLF and dealing with the government? What do you think we can do to ensure that COVID was not just a talk shop, webinar talk shop, but we're beginning to see a process that we will be proud as being part of history.
Thank you, Kojo, and Yoadan, thank you. I think one part that I like about your point, why do we have meetings about Africa outside Africa? And that, I think I'm with you. That is why we started Africa Tourism Leadership Forum. Unfortunately, you haven't attended, so we will make sure that you join us from now on. We also have what we call the Africa MICE Masterclass and the Africa MICE Academy. That is how the coalition of the Africa Convention Bureau concept started. We currently have South Africa, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Ghana, I think Tanzania, willing to collaborate. Now, I fully agree with you that with our 54 countries in Africa and only 6 have started, I think we got to step back. The issue is that we've not basically advocated for tourism and MICE to be at the center of policy discussions across the continent. The good news is that COVID has brought something, and Kojo is part of it. Ghana Tourism CEO and UNWTO, and I think a couple of people have come together and looking at exactly the same issue that you've spoken about. And a lot of meetings have been had the last 2 weeks, which I've been privy to. And I think their next meeting is to bring all the CEOs together to look at exactly what you're alluding to. So hopefully out of that, in addition to the coalition of the convention bureaus, MICE could be possibly escalated to the center of policy discussions in our various parliament and at the EU level. What we are also comfortable to say is that, and I'm glad you are based in Ethiopia because you're a very good ally, then talking to the AU is very simple. You got Mustafa at the moment who is trying to do something, but the truth is we need things to happen on the ground. So people like you could add that value. In terms of working across, using other platforms to basically grow the industry, existing and new platforms like exhibitions and stuff, I think there is virtual exhibition. I remember about 3 years ago where I participated, I spoke at a virtual exhibition that was run by Tourism Update. So I will recommend our stakeholders in the industry to look at it. Obviously, it's got to be a hybrid model. That is my proposal. Getting a lot more people to participate in exhibitions that exist and be able to grow the numbers at the same time when it comes to the live exhibitions. And Rick says something very important, and I would like all the PCOs here to take note of that. He used the term babies event, babies exhibition. There are a lot of new opportunities that will come. And those of us that have the capacity and the ability, let's take the chance. One particular area that I don't think Africa has been doing well, for instance, is the health sector. Look at this COVID-19. We are looking for hand gloves, we are looking for sanitizers, and nobody knows where to get them. And we know health and safety is going to be a critical issue going forward. We know risk mitigation is going to be. So we got to start thinking outside the box and look for what other source industries can we leverage to create new platforms to grow the sector. And with COVID, I think sitting at home, there are a lot, I wouldn't say source market, I'm looking at source industries. And there are a lot of them that we can look into that have never been on tap. The third and final will be our own local industry. There are a lot of agricultural industry here, but if you look across the value chain, there are a lot of opportunities that we can leverage. And I think a lot of the time, we don't spend a lot of time thinking about strategy. We want to get into the marketplace and do. So as we do all the things that I've alluded to previously, I think we should use that time also to strategize what opportunities are untapped that we can basically explore. And I'm available to chat with anyone who's interested to engage in that debate further. Thank you, Kojo.
Thanks, Kwache. Really appreciate that. I just want to say, as Bench Events, we actually ran an event a couple of weeks ago, about 10 days ago, called Hospitality Tomorrow, which was a completely virtual event. We don't have the opportunity at the moment to do anything kind of hybrid. So we did something virtual, and it had over 5,000 attendees. So it was very well received. And there is ways of doing exhibition and networking. It's maybe not quite the same, but we're looking at doing this. We'll keep you all informed on the potential conferences in this space for the future. Frank, I want to come to you for your closing remarks, because one of the things that Kwache said, and we've said throughout this, is African governments don't necessarily see the value. I would argue that Rwanda absolutely does, and it's such a huge part of your economy. And obviously with the strides that you've made with your airline, with the airports, with the infrastructure and the investment in education and everything else that's going on, what's the way forward from Rwanda, and how do you view collaboration?
Thank you, John. I think the way forward for Rwanda is to keep engaging the different partners we have and the different clients we have. And I think even for us here for this platform, I feel that this is the right way to keep on engaging basically to keep Africa relevant. If we don't do this again, we keep on saying it, nobody is going to do it for us. So I think for me, this is the starting point. If we keep on having these discussions and ensure that Africa stays relevant, stays on top of the agenda of the different, suppliers and the, people meeting buyers that want to choose Africa, we're going to win. And specifically for Rwanda, I think what we're doing is that let's now manage the situation now. Let's watch and monitor how it is going to progress. Let's keep in touch with our businesses, and definitely once this is done, we're going to see a positive comeback. I think that is the hope we have. But I think the message I want to share across is the intra-Africa is going to be a top priority for us. In terms of collaboration, I think we've seen a lot of feedback and messages from our participants asking about the collaboration we're talking about. Let's make it a reality. During the Africa Tourism Leadership Forum we're planning to host in Kigali, we want to ensure that this is at the center of the discussions and ensure that really this is put into practice. We come up with tangible actions that will allow us to, collaborate and network. And they're very good examples which we can, put forward. One, we're looking at some of the databases of different things that are happening in Africa, and the other African countries never get to know. But if we have a collaboration mechanism, then we can be able to share, whether it's association, based in South Africa, association based in Ghana, our corporate organization based in Rwanda, then we share that from there. We can even start, doing those businesses rather than waiting to, get business in Europe or elsewhere. So for me, intra-Africa is going to be a priority for all of us, and that's where we see a big win.
Yes, thank you, Frank. Funke, as a PCO in Nigeria, I know Nigeria don't have a convention bureau. Now, in this, I would like to use the word cooling period. In this cooling period of COVID, how do you use this time to mobilize, some of your colleagues to ensure that you can put pressure on either federal government or state government to ensure that you begin to chart a path towards having a convention bureau, and then you can be able to engage your other colleagues from other countries to see how mines or business events can be part of Nigeria's economic plan.
Yes, thank you. So basically, as I said, I'm part of so many associations and even different event industry members where we are all trying to chart a new course, right? So in fact, because of this, we've seen the need. We had always known, but we've now seen the full need of us having a convention bureau. I mean, we never really looked at it, properly. So now we're like, what? I mean, imagine if we had one voice, we had one opportunity, one place that we can all collaborate, we can all be one voice. Now the voices are very fragmented. So it's very fragmented right now in the country, and because there's so many areas. But because, I'm one of the thought leaders, one of the pioneers, and so I'm dealing with that with a few of my colleagues where we are trying to put together, I told you the agenda, and one of it is to have this convention bureau. One of it is to ensure that tourism, even in Nigeria, it becomes interesting. So domestic tourism, domestic events, people can come into Nigeria and and see the scenery that we have. Nigeria is beautiful. Different parts of Nigeria is beautiful, but we are plagued by insecurity. Flights are expensive even within Africa. It's so expensive. Logistics, getting in between one part of a country in Africa to another is really a logistics nightmare. So really, we will need to develop Nigeria, our tourism sector, make sure that the Convention Bureau, we set it up and make sure that they understand that this is the way forward. We need to build within before we can even build outside. Let's build within. You know, I was telling someone, I said, one of the things that really happened to us with this COVID issue was that it forced us to pause and build within. Imagine if this happened in Africa first before it went international. Everybody in Africa would have run abroad, but now we are forced to actually develop our own country. So it brings us to, yes, so we have to develop our own country at the moment. We cannot, you know, afford to, we can't begin to say, oh, they know how to do it better. You know, we know what to do. We know what to do, and the time to do it is now. And I'm really happy about this webinar that we're having. I'm happy that I'm meeting so many people that I didn't even know existed, you know, and I'm like, where have I been? What has been going on? So this is an opportunity for us to speak with one voice in Nigeria and, you know, and make sure that our government definitely listens to us. So that's the plan.
No, thank you so much. Thank you very much. And like you just rightly said, we need to start somewhere. And we believe that this will not be just a normal webinar. We want to put people together. I want to put some ideas out there. So with that, I come to Rick for final words. And then, yeah, we will begin to close the show.
Thank you, Kojo. And to you too, John. Of course, if you look at what EIC, the Events Industry Council, values this sector globally, and it's in excess of $1 trillion. UNWTO have said as a result of COVID-19, up to 23% of that trillion plus is going to just dissipate. I mean, that is a lot of money. I think the good side from an African perspective is really, if you look at certainly to the great comments that Kwachi has made and Funke have just shared and the rest of the panelists, we are at the beginning, I believe, of a very exciting journey. So there's not a lot we have to remedy and revisit and put right. If you take the ICA numbers from an association, only from an association point of view, Africa, I mean, I was going to say only enjoys, but Africa enjoys 3.2%. Let's call that 3%. So there's 97% opportunity for the continent and the 54 countries economies to sweat what they're already doing and doing well. And if they're not in there, Nigeria, take this word to your policymakers, to your ministers of tourism. And the first thing you say is, the my sector will bring 1,000 delegates to your country, to your city that were not coming. Now you can do the entire economic impact, the calculations and what have you, to go out and again, not knocking the leisure efforts, good efforts that Africa is doing from leisure, to get 1,000 Mr. and Mrs. XYZs to the continent is cost effectively, it's not as cost effective as it is from a MICE point of view. And we've got the numbers on that side of it. So there's no doubt we're sitting in a good position. Let's not panic. And I hear the private sector. I'm part of the private sector. You know, we're helping people in Cape Town feed and what have you. We're all doing those good kind of community things with enormous community pride. But we are at the beginning. I don't think we have to remedy too much because we've only just started out of the starting gates. And that is applicable to associations, as we said, corporates, the incentives. I mean, the continent is, I mean, the iconography is world-class. It is attractive. It has magnetism. It's photogenic. It's all the kinds of things that talk to the 360 degree of the MICE market. So for me, in terms of closing comments, ladies and gentlemen, there's absolutely no shortage of potential. We need a ring fence. Let's think, and I love what Kwachi was saying, it's got to be strategic. It's got to be strategically led before we rush off and just spend millions of dollars in marketing that in some instances perhaps isn't as accountable as it could be. So here's certainly looking to a great decade. It's not going to work, as I've said before, overnight. There's going to be 3 kind of time horizons. We need to get, from a convention bureau point of view, get operational excellence happening. Then we've got to that'll take a period of time. Let's say it'll take a year. We need to take the next year to 3 years to start to put in a growth strategy. And these are all relevant, measurable tools. And then the next 3 to 5, 6, 7, 8 years, the results will come into the destinations. And of course, the big thing we always advocate is whatever we do, particularly in the mice space, we talk to the SDG goals, of which number 1 is poverty alleviation, job creation, and generating wealth for everybody.
Thanks, Rick. Fantastic summing up. And thank you to all our attendees who are still there. I know we've overrun slightly, but I hope it was all worth your while. And we do really appreciate that. I'm really encouraged to hear so much talk about let's focus on intra-Africa. That's absolutely all that I'm focused on. You know, Rick talks about 3% and a bit of the meetings industry. It's 2% and a bit of the aviation market. So the 2 words I've been using a lot over the last few weeks is this is an opportunity to reset your business and then to reinvent your business. They're the 2 things that I think people should be doing. And that's a lot of the themes that have come out today. I want to say thank you so much to all of our panelists. They've given their time and their expertise, and it's been fantastic. To all our attendees, we will put this recording up onto YouTube, and it will be out as a podcast as well. You'll get a follow-up email with the links to that, with the links to all of our panelists LinkedIn, so you can connect with them, keep the discussions going. And Kojo and I will be back on the 1st of May. So every 2 weeks we're doing these. We'll be looking at another sector. Any suggestions, get in touch with Kojo and I, and we'd be happy to sort of bring this forward and hopefully formulate policy by using the practitioners that are on the ground. And I really do appreciate some of the engagements that we've had. So Kojo?
Yes, thank you, everybody. I think that it's been good. And to our esteemed panel, I'd like to thank you. The time that we called you, we sent you the mail, and you've been very cooperative. And I know that there's a lot of things to say, you know, now. And yes, please, if you can indulge us now, you can send us those feedback, and we can share with our audience. And thank you once again for staying with us. Our participants, we still have 140. Thank you once again. And
Wow.
Everybody, you're all unmuted. Say goodbye.
Yes. Thank you.
Daddy.